Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, our distinguished guests, on behalf of our partners, it is my pleasure to welcome you to our event focusing on investing in prevention of violence against children. I think many of you will agree with me that child protection remains one of the most unfunded sectors internally and internationally and domestically, regardless of constantly increasing needs that we are witnessing. I am your moderator, Tamara Tutnjević-Gorman from World Vision. I'm a senior policy advisor, and I will lead you today through our event. As I said, we have gathered today to discuss why and how we should prioritize investment in ending violence against children, even against this increasing fiscal austerity. We are also using this event and this opportunity to share with you our latest report focusing on making the economic case for national investment to prevent and eliminate violence against children. As you can see on a slide ahead of you, we have a very distinguished panel of speakers today, and I am also looking for a very frank and open and also fruitful discussion with all of you who joined us this morning. So before we start, I'll just give you a couple of housekeeping notes. We will start with the presentations and speeches, and then we're going to have some dedicated time for questions and answers. You will notice that there is a Q&A box on your screen, so please use that or raise your questions in chat. And at the end of sometimes 20 minutes before the end of the event, we will open the space for questions and clarifications. So now to begin, because we are on time, I want to say that violence against children is often the issue that children raise in consultations with development agencies and governments. And you would be surprised, but even issue of financing is often at their mind as they recognize the importance of investing in services that can make a difference in their lives. This is why today we're going to start our meeting by giving floor to children. We need to have their voices here in the room to remind us constantly why it is important that we meet and discuss these issues. So today with us on video are Tin and Medina, who are both members of the Global Partnership to End Violence Against Children's Youth and Advisory Team. Tin is a child activist and education activist from Bosnia and Herzegovina. And Medina is a member of the Borno State Children's Parliament in Nigeria, and she's an advocate for girls' rights, advocating against child marriage, sexual violence against girls, and promoting their education. So I would ask my colleague Jason to let the video play. Jason, thank you.
Violence is not just a word. Violence is not just a phrase. Mandate is also an ordinary word, but you seem to have much more interest in it.
My name is Medina. I'm a girl champion for Save the Children Nigeria. I am from Nigeria. Why I choose to be part of this group is to see that I speak out for the most vulnerable children and ensure that every child is given chance to peaceful assembly, protection of privacy. And as a girl champion for Save the Children Nigeria, it's my responsibility to see that children's views and opinion are carefully considered, because the experience of discrimination limits children access to participate actively. And my hope is to see that violence against children is totally eradicated globally.
Thank you very much, Jason. These were very short words from the children, but I just want to pick up two things that were said here. Mandate is a different word. We do have as adults mandates to protect children, as well as to fulfill the dream of Medina to end violence against children. So today we're going to dig deeper into how can we do that. And I would like to first invite our speaker, Ms. Najat Mala Majid, Special Representative of the UN Secretary General on Ending Violence Against Children, to deliver her opening speech. Welcome, Najat.
Thank you, Tamara. Dear team, dear Medina, distinguished delegates, dear friends, our discussion today is very timely as the high-level political forum considers how to build back better while accelerating implementation of the 2030 agenda. Investing to ensure an inclusive, just, resilient, and safe recovery for all children worldwide is needed more than ever for four main reasons. First, too many children worldwide are still left behind. More than half of the world's children are exposed to some form of violence every year. This has been exacerbated by the pandemic and the ongoing humanitarian crisis. More children than ever are facing extreme poverty, discrimination, and social exclusion. Prior to COVID-19, nearly 1 billion children lived in multi-dimensional poverty, a figure that has since increased by 10% because of the pandemic. This is exacerbating children's vulnerability to child labor, sexual violence, child marriage, trafficking, smuggling, and enrollment in criminal gang and armed groups. More children than ever are forcibly displaced, fleeing conflict, climate change, and natural disasters, widespread violence, and food insecurity. It is estimated that 36.5 million children were displaced inside or outside their country at the end of 2021, the highest recorded number since the end of the Second World War. In addition to this sad record, the war in Ukraine has displaced 4.3 million children, more than half of the children in the country, and 7.3 million children have been displaced because of natural climate and environmental disasters. All too often, child victims of violence lack access to essential services such health and psychosocial support, education, social and child protection and justice, and many of them are facing discrimination and xenophobia. It is a challenge that affects the whole world. No country is immune and no child is immune. Second reason, the human and economic costs of violence are big, but the economic benefits of investing in child protection, development, and well-being are even bigger. Violence, as you know, has a huge impact on children's physical and mental well-being. The consequences can last a lifetime. Child victims of violence may not reach their full education and health potential, which will limit their future income and productivity and impact social and human capital development. In addition to the human cost, a huge financial toll is paid by its victim and society. We shall hear more detail later today, but the headline figures for the cost of violence are stark. While leading studies suggest the cost of violence could be as high as 8% of global GDP. Exposure to violence, stress, exclusion, and crisis causes immediate and long-term physiological and psychological damage, which could cost up to $393 billion annually. If all children stayed in school, the earnings of national workforce will be higher by 4 to 14% of national GDP. In countries studied, ending child marriage could save up $17 billion per year by 2030, which can be used to improve public education and will help create a world where women and girls are equal to boys and men. This means wasting trillions and trillions of USD per year. So investing in children from an early age and through a life cycle approach is vital for resilient and sustainable social, human, and economic growth and will provide a high return. Third reason, investing in children also means involving them as part of the solution. Worldwide, children are increasingly at the forefront of initiatives for positive and sustainable social change. If we invest in empowerment of all children, independently of their status, including through their active participation and engagement, we can bring enormous gains, not only for children, but for society at large. Fourth reason, The clock is ticking. Less than 8 years remain to keep our promise by 2030. A paradigm shift is very much needed. We need to move from siloed and multiple plans that are not duly implemented to a child and people-centered development that is an integral part of the economic growth and national and local development plan. To this end, we must strengthen and scale up integrated cross-sectoral services, including child-sensitive social welfare, protection and care services, safe, inclusive, and empowering education, including digital learning, equal access to physical, mental, and sexual reproductive health services, child and gender-sensitive justice, as well as parenting support and sustainable social protection for vulnerable families and communities. The case for investment is made even stronger by the fact that many proven interventions have a low cost, and even modest increases in spending on these services can make a substantial difference. This integrated approach echoes the interdependence of children's rights set out in the Convention on the Rights of the Child and the interlinkages between the 17 SDGs. I commend those member states that have already begun to mainstream child rights and violence prevention in their SDG implementation and DNR, and encourage other member states to do so. In this connection, it is a pleasure to welcome Mrs. Paviliana Spandoni, head of the SDG Working Group of the Presidency of the Hellenic Government, to the discussion today. I was truly impressed during my recent country visit to Greece by the integrated approach adopted to achieving the SDG as they relate to children and violence prevention, and the inclusive and participatory approach taken for preparing the VNR. Ladies and gentlemen, increasing pressure on public finance cannot be used to justify a lack of investment in children. Investing in children and empowering them as actors of change to build inclusive, healthy, peaceful, just, and resilient society is a key message of the advocacy brief we are launching today. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the other partners who have worked with my mandate on developing it, namely Unicef, World Vision International, Child Fund Alliance, Plan International, and Save the Children International. We would not succeed without a wide mobilization and strong partnership, because partnership is the only path to success. We must give support and visibility to states that are committed to investing in an integrated cross-sectoral approach to child rights and violence prevention. And cooperation and multilateralism need to move from a donor-driven approach to a context-specific, results-oriented, and mutual partnership that fosters South-South, North-South, and triangular cooperation. We know what to do. We know how to do it. So now we must do it for and with children. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Najat, and for sharing your thoughts with us and reminding us that there is no justification not to invest with children, not to partner with children in our efforts to end violence against children. I will now invite my colleague, Dana Buslucha, who is a global lead for advocacy and external engagement from World Vision International, to take the floor. Welcome, Dana.
Thank you very much, Tamara. And I couldn't agree more with Najat. Thank you so much, Najat, for starting this meeting in such a great note. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, as I was preparing for this important event, I was reflecting on the fact that violence against children, it's actually a form of aggression against the world's human capital. And we are all living very challenging times, but our children who need predictability to fulfill their God-given potential perceive these times with fear and with anxiety. And sadly, we have to admit that they are right. Because throughout history, whatever was the socioeconomic crisis that we faced, the rise in violence against children always followed. And at only 8 years away from 2030, we should have already been celebrating some success in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. And yet, we are struggling in more and more of the indicators that are relevant for the children. And violence against children is an important one. The increased number in this global crisis and the compounding effects of COVID and conflict and climate had already had catastrophic implications for children worldwide, and they weakened their protection from violence. The impact is felt in almost every corner of the world, and unfortunately, by almost every child. But in those contexts that are the most fragile, we are seeing the hideous face of an unfolding hunger crisis that is making children pay an unjust price. Whether they suffer from starvation, or they are forced to marry, or to work, or even engage in transactional sex to help feed their families, children are paying a price. And if you remember, just a few years back, we were talking about 1 billion children experiencing violence and abuse every year. But it's most likely that this number has already increased significantly. One would expect, in the face of such a widespread and horrific aggression to our human capital, that we would see a strong global response. But that is not what we are seeing in the field or in the global political arena. And child protection, unfortunately, remains one of the most politically neglected and underfunded sectors, especially in humanitarian settings. The COVID pandemic showed us just how weak our systems for preventing violence against children and our child protection systems are in the face of a growing need. And the conflict in Ukraine and the global hunger crisis are another sobering reminder of multiple needs that are coming against an already impoverished and underfunded child protection system. And this cannot continue if we are still committed to the promises we made on the Agenda 2030 to end violence against children. And this is why our meeting today is of critical importance, because as professionals, we know there are available solutions. And we want to explore together and agree how we can better protect our children from violence by ensuring timely and effective investments in services and programs that truly make a difference. And by doing so, to unlock potential for economic growth and for stability in our societies. For the past 5 years, many partners who are represented here today worked on an investment case to end violence against children. And before we move to the presentation of this investment case, I just wanted to make 4 points. The first one is that violence against children comes at a huge cost. It has massive personal costs on the survivors. It marks them for life, leading to diminished physical and mental health and incredible hardship in forming healthy social relationships and even families. But violence also comes at huge financial loss for societies, and we will hear about that. We are actually talking about trillions of dollars worldwide that could have been used to help our children and avoid incredible trauma that is unnecessary. My second point is that violence can be stopped and prevented. And our world is so much better equipped today to do it than we were 50 years ago, for example. And all it takes is political will to invest in proven, evidence-based violence prevention programs that can avert the economic cost of violence, as well as remove a critical barrier to children achieving their health, their education, and their economic development potential. And yet, these proven interventions reach very few children today because they are not implemented at scale to make a real difference. And this is largely due to the fact that investment in violence prevention is still insufficient. And in fact, only 1 in 4 countries have fully funded their plans to end violence against children. So this is why my third point is that without investing in these interventions, we are missing a great opportunity to utilize violence prevention as a mechanism to further reduce poverty, to foster economic growth, and to enhance the social development that we so desperately need. And finally, my fourth point, just like Najat mentioned, is that the time to act is now. The growing need demands far more and smarter and more efficient investment to end violence against children. At the same time, it requires strong budgeting and data systems that are able to foster accountability and to assess the impact. Instead of reducing the investments in response to the growing financial austerity, the focus should rather be on embedding prevention of violence programs in all child-facing services to ensure the existing social spending is actually deployed efficiently and effectively in ways that protect our children from the wound of violence. So let me conclude. There is absolutely no reason why preventing and responding to violence against children shouldn't be a cornerstone of national and global plans to implement the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. We cannot simply expect to transform our societies if we continue to allow millions of children worldwide to fall prey to violence. And in fact, we should not even be looking for economic arguments to justify why investing in violence prevention program and response is needed, because it is, above everything else, our moral obligation to stop violence against children. And in doing so, we should not ignore that it is also a necessary investment in our future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dana, for these words, reminding us that investing in ending violence against children is truly investing in our future, in preventing suffering of so many millions of children. At the beginning, I think Najat and I have also mentioned that today we are using this opportunity to share with you findings of the new briefing that partners developed together on Violence-Prevention Dividend. And we are very fortunate today to have with us Ms. Genevieve Putin, Deputy Program Director from Unicef, who is going to share with us key highlights from this study. Genevieve, please, floor is yours. Welcome.
Good morning. I hope that you can see my screen. It's an honor to be with you today because UNICEF enjoys a very rich collaboration with all of the partners that are present in this event today, namely Child Fund Alliance, Plan International, Save the Children, the Special Representative of the Secretary General on Violence Against Children, and of course, World Vision. And we work together to meet the high and very legitimate expectations of children like Tim and Medina. We work on joint advocacy for the elimination of all forms of violence against children in support of the 2030 Agenda and specifically Sustainable Development Goal 16.2. One of the fruits of this collaboration, which I'm honored to present today, has been the production of this investment case entitled The Violence-Prevention Dividend: Why Preventing Violence Against Children Makes Economic Sense. Now, I do concur with Dana that most important argument for ending violence against children is the moral, ethical, and legal argument. Children's right to protection from violence is clearly established in international law. It's a matter of basic human rights and basic dignity, not only for children, but for adults as well. But few are aware that violence also creates huge financial costs for its victims, for families, communities, and the economy. Ending violence against children offers the potential to generate large social and economic dividends. It would remove a critical barrier to children achieving their full development potential and could save costs to societies that amount to up to 5% of national GDP. Before moving on, let's go over some key facts about violence against children. First, as previous speakers have said, it's a global and universal issue. About 1 billion children, half of all children in the world, experience violence every year. Evidence suggests that this violence may have worsened during the COVID-19 crisis. Second, violence against children is a continuum. It exists in multiple forms, including physical, emotional, and sexual abuse and exploitation. It may torment a child at home, at school, in the community, and online. Third, violence against children has multiple risk factors and includes a strong gender dimension. It disproportionately affects marginalized children, such as those from minorities, those experiencing poverty, and those that are homeless. Fourth, all violence against children can be prevented by well-designed, evidence-based interventions. Such interventions are well known and have been implemented successfully, including in resource-poor settings. And fifth, sexual violence against children is widespread. Its scale and complexity have increased through the misuse of digital technology to exploit children. Now, this table here summarizes a number of estimates that have been made regarding the economic cost of violence against children. The economic burden on society is the sum of all costs incurred by its child victims, their families, businesses, and governments. One seminal study found these costs could be as high as 8% of global GDP. Other studies from a range of countries have estimated the violence against children has economic costs up to 5% of national GDP. Globally, this equates to trillions of dollars wasted each year. The pain, suffering, and trauma of victims, their diminished physical and mental health, and the impact on their social relationships are difficult to quantify in economic terms, so one can only estimate that the actual cost is even higher, and that these numbers provide only a partial picture. This figure summarizes the range of costs of violence to individuals and families, businesses and organizations, and to governments. As you can see, for individuals and families, we note that violence can impair all aspects of children's physical, intellectual, language, emotional, and social development, with long-term consequences on their health, education, socialization, and future earnings. Child victims of violence may not reach their full education and health potential. This will limit, as previously mentioned, their future income and productivity. And children and their families often bear the direct costs of treating and responding to the impact of violence. Businesses and organizations are impacted both directly and indirectly through loss of opportunity. For example, violence in childhood can constrain the potential productivity of a workforce. Employees who were victims of violence in childhood may have enduring physical and mental health issues that affect the economic contribution they can make as adults. Absence from the workforce increase when adults must provide care to child victims. Governments incur direct costs in responding to the impact of violence on the short and long-term health of its victims. They also incur significant indirect costs associated with the direct costs associated with the child protection and justice system's response in providing rehabilitation to victims and enforcing the law against perpetrators. Violence against children also has indirect long-term costs as it undermines investments in children's health, education, and skills development. However, investment in proven evidence-based violence prevention programs can help avert the economic cost of violence and remove a critical barrier to children achieving their full potential. Many proven violence prevention interventions have a relatively low cost, making the case for investment even stronger. As shown in this table, multiple research studies have shown that violence prevention programs have positive returns on investment and offer benefits that largely exceed their costs. Yet, investments on violence prevention by most governments is currently low and insufficient. A survey by the World Health Organization of 155 countries found that while 80% of these countries had at least one national action plan to prevent violence against children. Fewer than 1 in 4 had fully funded this said plan. Based upon the economic analysis, the report sets out a call to action for governments and development partners. It calls on governments to recognize the high returns on investments in preventing violence against children and to incorporate evidence-based approaches to prevention in national development strategies, budgets, interagency coordination mechanisms, and monitoring. It calls on development partners to support further global research, analysis, and dissemination on the economic and financial dimensions of preventing violence against children, and to monitor and report on their own allocations to child protection and violence prevention. In conclusion, our report presents a compelling economic case for increasing investments in the prevention of violence against children. This should be an integral part of every government's economic growth and development strategy, including in the investments made in the recovery from the COVID pandemic. And it is and should become even more so a cornerstone of government's plans to implement the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Genevieve, for sharing this new study and fantastic data that we have collected from different countries, truly showing that while we are aware of our moral obligation to protect children, there is quite a lot of economic merit in doing so. I hope the colleagues that are participating in this webinar will have some questions. Please post them to Q&A, and we have also put the link to the report that you can see. Now, I think we are going to shift the gears slightly and going to look at how can a dedicated action from a national government can make a really difference in ending violence against children. We are very pleased today to welcome Ms. Pavlina Spandoni, who is the head of the SDG working group of the presidency of the Hellenic government, Greece. So Ms. Pavlina, can you please take a floor? Welcome.
Could I please, could you allow my video to turn on, please? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. I believe you need to unblock your video. We are...
it's blocked.
Aurelis, can we check what's going on?
Can you try now, please?
Yes, thank you. So I'm afraid I will need some help with the slideshow because my connection failed and I'm now connecting through my phone. Is it okay? Can we do that?
Yeah, that is fine. Jason and Aurelis, we have the slides. Can we put them up, please?
1 second, please.
Yes. These are the perils of technology, but we are really, really glad to have you with us today, Ms.
I'm very sorry for this burden, and thank you very much for inviting me. It's my honor to be here, and thank you, Your Excellency, for your kind words. You have been most encouraging.
Aurelis, while we are still waiting for a few seconds. That is, of course.
I totally understand, and I'm sorry.
No, don't worry. I think we're going to have it very soon. Well, it would be a miracle if we had a webinar which didn't have any technical glitches. I think, yeah, we are coming up. Welcome, please.
Okay,
go ahead.
Thank you. So if we go to the next slide, I will start by saying that this year Greece submitted its second VNR, and we decided to do it as a full roadmap to achieving the SDGs. So it's a rather long VNR. It contains 270 sustainability policies that have been implemented between 2018 and 2021. And these are all policies that are being monitored on a weekly basis. It also contains 110 forthcoming policies planned to begin this year, some with milestones and budgets. Of all these 380 policies, 98 are related or affect child and family well-being on various levels. This is nearly 25% of our VNR. And let me briefly explain how Greece came to this investment, which is indicative, of course, of the importance attributed to child-related issues. The answer is that it was social and economic resilience issues and social development aspirations that led the political decision to invest largely in children. Greece, as many of you have already heard, has been in many severe overlapping crises for more than a decade. The worst and longest one was the economic crisis with social consequences as well and political turmoil. At the same time, we had a double immigration crisis with incoming waves of refugees and at the same time waves of highly qualified human capital fleeing the country. Then came the COVID-19 pandemic, and now we have the emerging energy crisis, which is raising global concern. So as demographically, the country has an extremely low fertility rate and the second oldest population in the European Union. And on top of it all, its child and family support system urgently needed revision. So a crucial facilitator was that in 2019, we had a new governance model, which now allows for close monitoring, evaluation, and cohesion of policies. This was the basis in order for national action plans, many of which were around children or were affecting children, to start being implemented on a realistic basis. So, excuse me, I didn't tell you to change the slides. Can we go to slide 4, please? Yes. So, no, the previous one. Thank you. So the policies were there. We had 90-80 policies inside the VNR implemented or planned to start immediately. But was our investment apparent in our extensive VNR? I'm afraid it wasn't. And we tried to see why our child and family policies didn't come up as a cohesive narrative in the VNR. We concluded that the way the 17 SDGs are structured do not benefit cross-cutting issues. In other words, children are not structurally very visible in the 17 goals and their targets, at least not for what we are trying to showcase. This is a paradoxical situation because children are conveyors of sustainability more than any other age group because their mere existence can prove sustainability. Moreover, they will guarantee sustainability if we provide for them, and we need them and they need to be prepared to take sustainability further ahead after us. So what about the interlinkages? Do they not work? It's not the case, but what we see is that so far the interlinkages are mostly activated on a policy level. That is, how an individual policy helps promote different SDGs and targets. And of course, we all know that the 17 goals are interlinked. What we were trying to showcase in our VNR was how the SDGs were serving children's well-being, thus creating a unifying goal on an experimental higher level, like an overarching goal above the 17 goals. Can we go to slide 5, please? So we had one reason and one trigger to do it. The reason, of course, was that our 98 policies were laying low in the VNR and we did not like it. But the trigger was this. This is a photo of children's drawings. They were submitted in a national competition for primary schools. The theme was, children are dreaming of their future. So today's audience will immediately realize that children's dreams of the future is full of SDGs and targets. So our initial reaction, because we saw that too, was if children see their future in sustainability, how can we not see them in the SDGs? Do we see what they see or not? So if we go please to slide 6, we did this exercise And we saw that our child and family supporting policies spanned no less than 13 out of the 17 SDGs. It was impressive even to us because these were many more than the expected usual social SDGs. Slide 7, please. This is how it looks inside the VNR. It spans 4 pages because there are so many policies. These are the titles of the policies, actually. And I have to be clear that this was a basic approach without a specific intention to mainstream policies all over the SDGs. It was a mapping exercise, but it opened up a window and new possibilities because now, on a second level, we will be able to measure progress on the issue. We will also be able to evaluate the indicators for the issue to see if they are adequate, if we need more, perhaps, to plan, very important, and to expand in even more SDGs, and to overall manage our investment. So let's go to slide 8, please. In conclusion, we believe that there is added value and potential in mainstreaming cross-cutting issues among the SDGs. Thus, we would like to extend an invitation to the countries, to the UN, and of course the major stakeholders for further elaboration and perhaps adoption of the mainstreaming practice. This, we believe, that will encourage the countries to gather their strengths and enhance national ownership on important issues that need more attention or that are not emphasized enough in the VNRs for structural reasons. Children's issues, particularly child poverty and violence against children, fall in this category for many of us. Thank you very much for your attention, and we will be delighted to hear back.
Thank you very much, Ms. Polina, for your great presentation. I think you have inspired a lot of people how to look at their VNRs in a different way. And I particularly like when you said that children are conveyors of sustainability. Like, we really need to look at this as our future. I think it's a recurrent theme today that we've heard from all the speakers, recognizing the importance of investing in children and importance of multi-sectoral interventions and bringing things together as we try to address issues of poverty and issues of violence. I am going to open, believe it or not, we are on time, almost a couple of minutes, maybe over. So I'm opening the space for the questions and answers. I would prefer if you can type your questions rather than speak, so we can go through more. And I will start with a question that was asked earlier on the Q&A, which is, what can we do to better scale up interventions to end violence against children? I think the comment was made in relation to Cameroon, where there is not enough services being scaled up, particularly in certain parts of countries where there was a lot of violence against children. But in general, can we look at it? Would any of the panelists like to take this question and offer some solutions on how can we scale the interventions better to end violence against children? Yeah, Najat, hi, go ahead. I didn't see your hand.
Yes, I will try to respond. If I understand well the question, is really the problem of scaling up, intervention. And I think the big problem of all, the policies and programs, that we are working on a siloed approach. We have huge initiatives, huge programs that are not duly scaled up. And I think the main important things and the lessons we need to learn, as was highlighted by all the previous speakers and the Pavlina, is to make sure that you have this chain of services, because you can have wonderful parenting programs, but if you have not a strong case management, it's not going to work. If justice is not accessible, if you have corruption, it's not going to work. So it's really these packages of all this chain of services that we need to push, because we cannot continue to have telling, well, we have a wonderful parenting program, we have wonderful schooling. And I think what it's important is really to standardize, the approach, to make sure that even in the poor countries, at the front line, when children are leaving, it could be through school, through community, to have a standardized, approach to make sure that children have access to this chain of services. And it is possible. And we need to stop having, this project approach, this piecemeal, this band-aid, that it's not working and it's not impacting. So this, I think, is a big lesson to learn, not only selling one project because it's my mandate. Children are not divided among mandates and among. And another point, because you are highlighting, Africa, and I am coming from Africa, we have to be very careful. The problem of children is not only under the Ministry of Social Affairs, Social Development, and the big title. Children are part, has to be under the government, and has to be part, in each piece of government, Ministry of Interior, Justice, Social Affairs, Health, and so on. And it has to be under, the Prime Minister. This is really, really important with dedicated budget. This is really important. Just to really very quickly try to respond.
Thank you, Najat. Anybody else would like to add?
May
Genevieve, please.
I add something?
Yes, please. First, Ms. Paulina, then Genevieve. Sorry. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Ms. Paulina, and then Ms. Genevieve. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. So I'm sorry. It's on the phone. I cannot see everyone. Ask you to
no
speak.
problem, and I can't see all the people at the same time. So go ahead.
Sorry. So just quickly, I would like to add that well, I agree with Her Excellency, and I think that you should take the message centrally and higher, and this is how the policies will be more effective, because it was I remember a significant impact in Greece too, which is, of course, it's part of the European Union, but it was lagging behind in several social policies, as many Mediterranean social states are. And the impact, it was in the first, the opening speech of this government in 2019 by the Prime Minister. We were all impressed to hear him say that the unaccompanied minors will be under his wing in order to improve a scary situation that was going on at that time, that because there were thousands of minors living in the streets because the system could not accommodate them yet. Now this is over, of course, but it was very impactful and important. And some people, they were a little, didn't like it very much, because they heard, they thought, why did he mention the foreign children and unaccompanied minors and not Greek children? But he gave a very strong message. He shifted the focus on the most vulnerable children, those who nobody wanted to know existed. So this brought a series of changes, which were, consistent and brought results. So I would encourage you wholeheartedly to take the message centrally and high.
Very much on that message, Ms. Pavlina. Please, Genevieve, floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm so glad that Ms. Bandoni responded before me, because I was going to say the centrality of finding leadership in governments at a central level, and leadership that stems, indeed, as also Najat said, not necessarily from the institutions that are explicitly responsible for child protection, but the other parts of government. In terms of the scaling up, I think really leadership is an essential ingredient, but also incorporation of violence reduction interventions in national plans, policies, institutions, work plans, and of course with the budgets. And as we say in the report, monitoring and reporting as well. So holding the duty bearers accountable and putting the information in the hands of families and communities and children themselves, so they can actually exercise their right and hold the duty bearers accountable would be another important ingredient of the scale up. Integration, of course, of violence prevention interventions through the systems, the education system, the health system. All these points of contact with a child need to be sharing in the responsibility to prevent the violence, and then if it occurs, to stop it and treat it. And finally, we would add support to caregivers and parents, which really must be universally available, because especially in these times of crises, parents are under incredible pressure, having to cope, for themselves and for the basic needs of their family. So the expansion of social protection coverage to include vulnerable families, undocumented migrants, which happened during COVID-19 in many, many countries, is vertical and horizontal expansion of social protection, but unfortunately is now under threat because of the fiscal crises that many governments face, has to be maintained with the target of supporting parents and caregivers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else who wants to add anything to this, so we can move to the next question? Okay, Adana, you unmuted.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe to add. I absolutely agree. I've seen this how systems can change when there is a vision and the different actors are actually brought around the table to build around that vision. I've also seen how important it is to identify the solutions that are working in the context and to make sure that those solutions are built into the overall vision of the system. Another thing that I've seen at work is looking at a longer-term plan and not expecting that everything will be solved immediately, but holding on that longer-term vision and starting to build systemically 1 year after the next, because no government can fund everything at once in the first year, but it is essential that there is a plan to increase the funding, to increase the investment in services that are preventing violence against children, including parenting and public awareness of what is violence against children, referral systems, and so on. But also making sure that what is that word? Don't let the better prevent achieving the good, right? So make sure that you are improving year on year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dana. The second question I will ask, and then after that we would have to look into closing up and go to Meg to close us. But the other question is really related to what we were presenting today in financing study. And it says, given that preventing violence against children is politically neglected and chronically underfunded, what messaging do you find to be the most powerful and effective when speaking to partners and trying to get them to invest in violence prevention? So what messaging, what do we say to our partners, particularly government partners, that is very effective and powerful to increase investment? Would someone like to take that question? Yes, Najat, go ahead.
Yes, I think it was very well done during the presentation, and all of us we were. I think what is important is really seeing it as an investment. We have to stop seeing social sector with a big S as a kind of additional and not a priority. And really, it's important what in preventing, we know the cost of the impact, the cost of non-acting, and we know currently what we are saving. So it's really important to highlight this high return on investment and the long saving cost that could be used. And we need to do that to convince not only the government, Ministry of Planning, Ministry of Finance, and also donors and all these partners, because we need to see it as an investment. It's not taking care of these poor children. This is really investing in preventing, and it is possible. And I think what we need to add currently that we have a big list of evidence-based and cost-effectiveness action. So we need not only selling one by one, having all these packages and these packages of services showing that it's cost effectiveness and have a high return on investment. And I think this we need to move forward to make sure that it's seen as an investment and not a competitive priority that has to be dealt after economic growth and so on.
Thank you, Najat. That was very, very helpful. We have few more minutes left. There is a question for Ms. Pavlina in the Q&A section. Do you want to answer it publicly? Or you want to type it maybe just?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm afraid I cannot type on my phone. So
okay, so just quickly you can respond. There's a question from Greece. So please, if you can respond to that question, and we would move to
the question is about the unaccompanied minors and the steps that need to be taken, because there were some recommendations that the systems should be strengthened. The truth is that in 2019, thousands of unaccompanied minors were living on the streets or in the rough. So this was a very hard situation to manage. And what this government tried to do, and I think it succeeded, was first of all to gather the children, to try to locate them and relocate them to safe accommodation, and try to promote them in a social integration system, which is still underway. Many of the children, hundreds of children, were relocated in other EU states after bilateral collaborations. What was important, as we had also discussed with Her Excellency in Greece, was the abolishment of the protective custody, which was in place until 2019. Now, it's not there anymore, and we're very proud and glad that it ended, because it wasn't. It was a traumatic method to protect children in the police stations. Yes, there are a lot of steps to be taken still, because we need to make sure that the unaccompanied minors they will be integrated and they will have a chance to succeed and to lead their own, to be leaders of their own lives in Greece or wherever else they choose. But I'm confident that we've come a long way in a very little time, actually, in only 2 or 3 years.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pandoni. Now, we are out of the time, and before we close today, I would like to invite Ms. Meg Gardner, Secretary General from Child Fund Alliance, to deliver closing remarks for this event. Meg, please. Thank you.
Thank you. And really what I'm going to do is just synthesize very briefly what we've heard today from our specialist, because I think a lot of compelling points have been made. And I also think that we have a couple of key points for call to action that have been, I think, guided by some of the analysis that we've done online here. Just number one, I think just looking at the problem again, we have to remind ourselves that even though in 2015, these NGOs around this table, World Vision, Child Fund Alliance, Plan International, SOS, Save the Children, and others worked really hard to make sure that there was an indicator, 16.2, on ending violence against children in the SDGs, that even this many years later, child protection remains underfunded in our sector, despite the well-documented increases in violence. Of course, in 2015, we didn't see what was coming on the horizon. Number one, before the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, 1 billion children lived in multidimensional poverty. It's estimated now that there have been a 10% increase in that, yielding more issues on violence against children. We know that exposure to violence can cost up to $395 billion annually, and that ending violence against children would save as much as 8% of GDP on welfare, health, education, and other services. And we also know that investment in proven evidence-based programs is possible, but the political will still needs to be heightened. And according to WHO, 1 in 4 countries have invested in their plans and their VAC plans, but a lot more needs to be done. And of course, we have a huge challenge. 36.5 million people have been displaced owing to conflict. The issues of child protection and humanitarian interventions remain underfunded. Greater advocacy is needed. On the good news front, and there is a little bit of good news here, we heard from a number of people today, including Greece, about what they're doing to make sure that there's a greater intersectoral approach amongst the SDGs and policy formulation. I think the call to action, the invitation they put out is very key. I think we also understand from what we're being told that incorporating violence prevention in national plans is part of our ongoing advocacy and bringing some of the evidence that we've learned. And again, I'm pointing to something that was raised at the Unicef presentation. There are about 8 studies referenced from Liberia to Kenya to India about what happens when good programs are introduced, whether it's parenting programs, whether it's cash transfers to address child and prevent child marriage in India, whether it's programs to reduce corporal punishments in the schools. We do see on a small scale that things are possible. The issue of scaling up has been brought out over and over today. I think Najat reminds us that ending violence against children is cross-sectoral. It's all of our responsibility. We have to put this both in the hands of governments to say, do not work in silos, work across sector, but also, as always, engaging, as Najat and others said, engaging the communities in solutions is very, very key. Opening up with young people today was important, and working alongside with children on solutions, as we know, is very important and part and parcel of the work of many organizations. Again, just in the end, it was brought out to share, we have to share the responsibility to end violence, supporting caregivers and parents. Parents are under incredible pressure. So again, we have to bear that in mind as we're undertaking our advocacy. A couple of points that we've also learned, I think, is that violence against children results in direct and indirect costs for individuals, their families, their places of work. And the sum of these costs represents the total cost of violence against children to society. And these costs, as it was pointed out by our presenters, may be incurred in the short term or the long term. So again, for our advocacy, reminding ourselves that violence against children, direct and indirect costs. Secondly, the cost of the unrealized potential represents the income foregone by individuals due to deaths or the impacts of violence on their education, their health, their emotional stability, and that limits income earning potential. And that the opportunity costs, you know, basically things that can't happen because cash and time were consumed dealing with the consequences of violence. Very, very important for us to remember that when we advocate for avoiding a piecemeal approach, taking the message centrally and higher, that we remind ourselves and bring these facts out to governments. Indirect costs, direct costs, opportunity costs, and the foregone, the foregone consequences of all the things that don't happen because of violence. So I think today we're in the hands of some really good people who have started a conversation to take this much higher. I think our representative from Greece put out a challenge to others based on the study that they've done, 98 policies, looking at, many of them looking at children, trying to make sure that the structural linkages between the SDGs and children are more pronounced. I think these are things that we can take forward with us in our next steps. So Tamara, thanks very much for inviting us. Thank you for all the work that World Vision is doing on counting pennies. 2 versions of counting pennies have come out. I think a third one on the impact of ODA on violence prevention is something that we will also be taking forward with us in the halls as we continue our advocacy. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Meg. I want to thank all the panelists who joined us today. It was a real pleasure to have you around, and I think we managed to energize the conversation, as Meg said. I want to thank everybody who joined our webinar. On behalf of the organizers of Child Fund, Plan International, Save the Children, Office of the UN Special Representative on Ending Violence Against Children, UNICEF, and World Vision, I hope to see you again on one of our events on advocacy to finance ending violence against children. Thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.